So with the recent release of the Space World demo for Pokemon Gold and Silver, there's been sort of a resurgence in the discussion of the early Pokemon games and sort of their development, especially on places like the Pokemon board on 4chan, and I assume a lot of other more Pokemon-centric places, but V's where I spend most of my time now. While I was there, someone posted a image that was the concept art for all the gym leaders from Pokemon Red and Green, and in it, someone pointed out that Erika and Sabrina looked like they were swapped late in the game. When you look at the concept art for Erika, she's sort of sitting there and has a Pokeball floating in her hand, moving it with her hand, you know? It's kind of an old magician's trick to hold an object between your hands without touching it. You actually have like a string connected to it. Sabrina, on the other hand, is wearing this sort of almost safari garb, and she has a whip like one you would expect a lion tamer to have. That's kind of a holdover from an earlier concept they had where the trainers would actually take part in the fights. All the Team Rocket grunts have whips for this reason, and they just sort of kept it because it makes them look sinister. Next to each other, it really looked like Sabrina was the grass gym leader and Erika was the psychic gym leader. And it sort of prompted an interesting question of where they swapped late in development. The thread didn't really go super deep into this. It was just sort of one of those things where they were like, man, I really wish we could get an early version of Red and Green to sort of check those questions out. Because while these Gold and Silver editions were super interesting, it didn't necessarily feel all that different from the product we actually got. Whereas early versions of Red and Green could have entirely new mechanics in there that we've never seen before. But I was a lot more interested in this idea that they just sort of swapped the typings of two of the gym leaders late in development. So I started to sort of dig a little deeper into it, try and figure out why they would do this. Why would you change something so suddenly at the end? And I think I have a solid answer, and I think it has to do with the psychic type itself. Psychic type Pokemon are sort of built as an Achilles heel type of thing. They're super powerful, but they have a very strong weakness. Now, in the first generation, psychic types were too powerful. It was a huge problem that they had difficulty balancing around psychic types. There's about 9 psychic Pokemon in the game. Only about 5 are pure psychic, and then the others are half psychics. But they were all pretty difficult to deal with, because in the first generation, the only Pokemon that psychics are weak to are bug types. I don't know why that is, or rather, I didn't know why that was, because it didn't seem to make any sense. The whole crux of Pokemon is like a rock, paper, scissors sort of deal, and most of it's logical, or I can follow the logic. Water puts out fire, so water is strong to fire. Fire burns grass, grass is weak to fire, so on and so forth. But some of them are kind of weird, and bug and psychic is one of those. In my head, I always thought maybe bugs feel weird on your skin, so they break your concentration. Maybe that's what they're going for, but it always felt out of place. It never quite fit. But digging into this and digging into the actual game theory that they were crafting, I think it actually does make sense. Bug types are super weak. They're not very strong, they're not very sturdy, and they're not very fast. I think they might actually be okay in terms of speed, but speed doesn't really matter if you can't hit and you can't take hits. So I think the decision was made late in the game's development, or at some point in the game's development, to have the psychic type be weak to the bug type, an otherwise worthless type. This meant that you would have to have bug types because the psychic types were so strong, so people would now use this useless type because they had to. If someone was going to pull out a psychic type, and why wouldn't they, you would need to have a dedicated bug type to take them down. makes sense from a gameplay standpoint. You take a super strong piece and you give it a weakness to a very weak piece to elevate that piece. The only problem is, the only bug Pokemon in the first generation that's actually worth anything in terms of damage output is Beedrill. And Beedrill is part poison. Now, for some reason, Psychic Pokemon are stronger against poison types. They deal more damage. Again, I don't understand what this is. Maybe it's because poison tends to attack the body, so it's like a mind over matter sort of deal, but again, it doesn't really make much sense. And basically that means Beedrill, which is already not very sturdy because it's a bug type, can't take more than a hit or two from a psychic type, if that. So the only thing you have that can really take them down can't even do that very well. So how do you deal with this problem? Well, the answer seemed to be to introduce another type that's more specifically built to take down psychics, and that type is Ghost. There are a lot of references to psychic types being weak to Ghost type Pokemon in the first generation. In Sabrina's actual gym, there's a character who says something along the lines of psychics are only afraid of bugs and ghosts. The official strategy guide for the first few games mentions that psychic types are weak to ghost, and most memorably, the first anime had a multi-episode arc where Ash went to get a ghost Pokemon to take down Sabrina. But that's not actually true. In the game itself, psychic Pokemon are actually immune to ghost type attacks, so it's a complete fabrication. So here's what I think happened. I think, late in development, they realized how strong psychic types were. They realized that the bug types they had introduced actually weren't very powerful. So they had to give psychics another way out. They had to give psychics another weakness, and ghost types were the obvious type. When you look at the first generation of Pokemon, there's only 3 ghost types in the entire series: Ghastly, Hauntar, and Gengar. I think these Pokemon were originally poison types, and late in development they decided to give them a totally new typing specifically to fight the psychic types. This is why the Ghastly line is actually part poison, and yeah, I was surprised to learn that too. I've been playing and watching Pokemon since I was a little kid, yet I never found out that Gengar was part poison. That was completely insane to me. I think there might have been some remnant left over in their code. Maybe they had difficulty changing the typings in the games at that point. Pokemon didn't run very well to begin with. The first few games, the first duo of games were actually so buggy they had to release a 3rd version to fix the bugs. And even that wasn't an amazing piece of work. So I can see the developers, who already had to push the game back a year, deciding they didn't want to fuck with the code too much, and so instead of going in and messing with everything, they tried to minimize as much messing around as they could. In later generations, they actually did fix this, and psychics are weak to ghost types, but in the game as is, ghost types actually can't hit psychic types. Sort of. While that is the official type damage in the game, there's only 2 damaging ghost type moves in the game: Lick and Nightshade. Now Lick doesn't work, but Nightshade has a special effect where it nullifies type advantages and disadvantages, so it can hit a psychic type. So when they say that psychics are afraid of ghost, maybe Game Freak is playing some sort of 4D chess. Maybe they're trying to say someone with a psychic type is going to see a ghost and go like, that can't hit me, and then you hit him with Nightshade, and then they're caught off guard. Maybe that's what they're going for, but that wouldn't really be a great that wouldn't really work very well. And it seems really abstract for a game that was mostly designed for kids to pretend they're collecting bugs. So if that's what they were going for, I think they would have abandoned it pretty quickly because I don't think it would have worked in practice. I can see someone at Game Freak who was really dedicated to psychic types being powerful, maybe as a counterpoint to how powerful dragon types were, and not liking them adding all these weaknesses. So once they determined that they were going to make Gengar a ghost type, that person said he has to be part poison as well, so he's not too powerful. But then when they realized that fucked it up, he was like, well, we'll just get rid of the ghost type completely then. But because they didn't want to get rid of it, he just nullified it, so that way it didn't hurt psychics. Just this one really spiteful programmer pissing all over the attempts to make the game more balanced. Even if that's not how it went down, and it was a simple programming error, and they just missed it until the game came out, which isn't the craziest thing, that doesn't explain why they would switch those gym leaders around. And I think the reason they did it is because, honestly, if you're going to take a psychic type down, you can't really use type advantage all that much. As I said, Beedrill wasn't very strong, and the one ghost line is also part poison, and don't really have any moves, and they don't really work anyway. So even if you're following the advice that you're getting from other sources, it's not the most efficient way of dealing with it. You'd probably be better off just using your normal Pokemon, the ones that aren't part poison, like your starters. Poison types were pretty common in the first generation, so actually having a non-poison type Pokemon to fight psychic Pokemon with might be harder than it sounds. But 2 of the 3 starters aren't poison at all, and don't have any typing mix-ups with psychic types, so the odds are in the favor of the player at that point. They may have just decided that the small gap in time that a player would get would be enough to take on the psychics with medium difficulty. I believe Sabrina's Pokemon are in the mid to low 30s, which is where your starters get their final evolution. So if someone was really having a hard time, they could just grind for a bit and then usually steamroll them. I don't remember Sabrina being a particularly difficult fight anyway, so that seems plausible. The decision may have been made at the last minute to just swap these 2, which are right next to each other, and just give them each other's teams, and then just swap the levels around a little bit so that it makes sense. But why those 2 specifically? Why not change Erika so that she's actually later in the game, like at Cinnabar Island instead of Blaine? Well, I think they kind of built the areas in such a way that it made more sense for those characters. Blaine is an old hermit on an island where no one else lives. He kind of fits there a lot, and Erika might not. She's got this traditional Japanese look to her, so putting her on this faraway island in the middle of nowhere doesn't quite fit with that look. Alternatively, and much more simply, it might have been for narrative purposes. In Saffron City, where Sabrina's gym is, there's another gym of fighting types that got muscled out by her. It's possible that idea was decided later in development, but then they realized a grass type muscling out fighting types didn't make a whole lot of sense. So they decided at the last minute to swap her with Erika because psychics are strong against fighting types. Some interesting things about Sabrina in particular, and Erika to a lesser extent. Sabrina got redesigned in the anime to be more psychic, I suppose, or to be more sinister. In the Pokemon manga, they actually made her a member of Team Rocket, and I think it's partially because of the whip she has. And also, she kind of looks like a member of Team Rocket. Not necessarily in the games, but she's wearing the same... It looks like she's wearing the same uniform that Jessie is wearing of the anime. I don't know exactly the timeline of the manga and the anime and the games, but maybe somewhere in there someone saw something and decided to make a connection that way. She uses her anime redesign from Gen 2 onward. When you refight her in Gold and Silver, she's got that appearance, and in the remakes, she has that appearance. But Erika got some minor redraws too. In Pokemon Yellow, they altered her art so that the Pokeball is on the ground next to her instead of floating between her hands, probably because they realized that it just sort of looked weird. Most people just assume she's playing with it and like tossing it in the air, but as a static image, it does look like a psychic thing. That's kind of everything I have to say about it. There's really not a whole lot to go on. I think my speculation about ghost types holds up pretty firm, especially because in the game, the only person who represents the ghost type is Agatha. She's part of the Elite Four, and she only has like 2 or 3 ghost types, because those are the only ghost types in the game. And then she has a Golbat, and Arbok. So I think she was originally a poison type trainer, and then at the last minute they changed her as well, but they didn't have enough for a full team, and they didn't want to give her dupes, so at the last minute they just sort of changed her title and didn't change anything else about her. And I think that's interesting, the notion that ghost types were added very late in development. That weird caveat that in the first generation, for some weird-ass reason, they just misprogrammed ghost types somehow, is super bizarre. And it really stands out to me as, I don't know, just one of those things that people don't talk about, and it's crazy that no one's noticed it before. But maybe they have, and what I'm talking about is bullshit. Either way, I thought it was super interesting. It's something that I've not seen discussed super well, so I wanted to pump this out super fast and sort of give my 2 cents. Hopefully you enjoyed this dumb little diatribe. I'll try to have some more lolcow content out in the nearish future. Thanks for watching. You should join my Discord. There's a link in the description. And I don't really give a shit what else you do. Leave a comment. I like those. I don't care about likes, though. I don't give a shit about any of that. Whatever. Bye.